Welcome to Community Voices with your host, Tarence Lauchie. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Now, into the program.
Greetings and welcome back to Community Voices. I'm Tarence Lauchie, and you are tuned in to 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. In the studio today, we have a young gentleman who's going to be sharing some information with us about his journey, about some experiences relating to healthcare, race, HR, lots of topics, great things. But I'm excited to announce that we have in the studio Mr. Ovell Barbee. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Terrence. Excited to be here.
I'm glad you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule to be here. You're an author. You are a speaker, trainer, the consummate professional when it comes to human resources. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what got you here to this conversation.
Well, I'm a Grand Rapidian, born and raised in Grand Rapids. I grew up across the street from what is now known as Martin Luther King Park. I talk about the park experience in the book, but that's part of my fabric in terms of like both sets of my grandparents moved to Michigan right out of Mississippi.
Wow.
Back in the 40s. And so I have multiple generations here in the Grand Rapids area. So I am definitely an advocate on behalf of the community. In terms of my interest in human resources, I think I just kind of landed in human resources many years ago. I received a degree in social work, and I think I used that the most, having worked in human resources, and then decided that HR was going to be my path for me. First, when I left for college, I had planned to become a news reporter. A lot of people don't know that, and study communications, and I think that that has contributed to allowing me to have a platform as a speaker, now an author.
Now, did you study at Michigan State University?
So publicly, I'm a diehard Wolverine because I started undergrad and master's #1 at University of Michigan. But I tell people that I enrolled at Michigan State under a different name to protect my loyalties to U of M.
So you went incognito just to get a Spartan degree. Man, that speaks volumes. Well, you Wolverines are all the same. No,
there you go.
I'm from Michigan State University. But, I think what's important is that we accomplished it. We made it through. Mm-hmm. As a black man in America, you've actually beat a lot of odds. We'll talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. And just for those who might be tuning in, wanted to do a quick station identification. I'm Tarence Lauchie, and this is Community Voices on 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. I have with me Ovell Barbee, author, speaker, presenter, and like I said, a consummate professional in the HR area. That's obviously a passion, but you have a testimonial. This book that you wrote recently is called A Human-Centered and Progressive Approach to DEI and Positive Workforce Engagement, The Big House. So tell us a little bit about the impetus behind this book. I know you made some transitions career-wise from one of the largest employers in West Michigan, and that was the Spectrum Healthcare System that is now called Corewell Health. Was that the impetus, or you were working on this in general already?
I would say that my life's journey has always been underway. Mm-hmm. And so following my time at Spectrum, I became the Chief Human Resource Officer at Indiana University Health System. And what I found very interesting is what I saw at many organizations in terms of treatment of diverse team members, the fact that diverse team members overly populated hourly positions, and as people progressed up their career ladders, you saw fewer faces that looked like mine. And someone described me and they said, Ovell, it's almost like you can relate to people's stories, having grown up in a divorced household, working since I was 12. And I learned how to navigate in a corporate environment. People would ask me a lot of times, how did you do it? And my answer was trial and error and a lot of bumps and bruises.
Survival, yeah.
It was very interesting. As an African-American male, we make up a single digit percentage of those that have made it to the C-suite level.
Absolutely.
And I was always very mindful of the fact that I'm representing others and wanting to make sure that their voices were heard. So the big house is not the U of M version of the
Correct.
big house.
Just a play on words. But this has to do with probably some plantation thinking, right?
Right. In terms of, some elements in corporate America reminding me of the descriptions of slavery.
Yeah. One of my philosophies since moving here 21 years ago was that the area kind of reminds me of that scenario. And other authors have written on the subject. Scott Welch, I've had him on, and we talked a little bit about what he's written from a perspective of us crossing color lines and just really earning a place or being given access to a place at the table. One of my philosophies has always been that if you're not at the table, typically you're on the menu. And that kind of buys into the big house mentality. A plantation would be an area or a place owned by an individual who utilizes the human resources of enslaved labor in order to proceed in becoming even more successful. I mean, the success is there in owning the land and owning the house, but the quarters, the resources, the amenities for those who are the enslaved workers is quite different. And I know that's a graphic depiction, but I think this is some of the stuff that you're making references to. Tell us a little bit about the book.
So in the book, I think that's an excellent frame up for this conversation, the reference to human resources. As I articulated my journey as a diverse leader, making it to the C-suite and then, concluding with recommendations for corporate America to do better. One of the recommendations is, as you talk about your people, you're talking about human beings. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't have to make that reminder. Yeah. But unfortunately, we still live in a time where that is true. And so as I thought about, some vulnerability and sharing the stories, the things that were asked of me as a team member, as a leader, and the importance of being able to use your voice, those are things that people will hopefully rally around in terms of having better experiences at work. One of the primary mantras that's associated with me is stop the silence, along with use your voice. People would tell me horrendous stories of things that have occurred to them at work, and because of that job connection, I think there was a hesitancy in speaking up and stating that the treatment was unacceptable.
So the experiences of racism, prejudice, biases, isolation, maybe even a perpetuation of a depravity mindset. You mentioned something a little off air about hourly workers and about people not being paid equitable salaries. So I know this isn't a very big book, but I'm sure there's a lot in here that leads to not only your consulting work, but your many years of experience and expertise in seeing it happen. What drives you for this kind of work? What pushes you into wanting to do this?
Well, that's a great
question. Because you're kind of boxing yourself out from the
Mm-hmm.
corporate mainstream now by speaking up and telling the stories of what you experienced inside of the C-suite.
Well, and I didn't know that you were going to ask me that question, but I have an answer for you. I went to a speakers boot camp, and the organizers asked the participants, what's so unique about you, and what do you want as an outcome in terms of you, delivering these messages across the country? Most of us said, gulp. How will we answer that question?
Right.
And so my answer was, the first part of it, what's so unique about me is, as an African-American male who's worked since he was 12 years old, I have masters from 2 Big Ten universities, and I successfully made it to the C-suite level in 2 disciplines, DE&I and human resources. Mm-hmm. So that's part of my answer. The second part took me a little longer to land on the conclusion. And I know we have talked about the George Floyd video, but that was very impactful to me as an African American male because I was working in DE&I at the time.
Yeah.
People called me after watching that video and they said, oh my God, I had no idea the travesties that people have to endure. What can I do to help you? And whereas I appreciated the outreach and I found an assignment for many of those people, the more I started thinking about it, I said, that is really problematic.
Yeah.
It took you watching a 9-minute video
a live lynching
of somebody being murdered before you raised your hand to say you want to help somebody. I'm not sure that I want you standing behind me with the trust exercise.
Right.
And then what I now have landed on is I want people to be more proactive in their willingness to advocate on behalf of somebody else. And a lady, she challenged me. She was like, Ovelle, that's deep.
Yeah.
She said, but you need to provide examples of what you mean by that.
Right.
And I said, okay. So you hear somebody say, call 911, you're the first person grabbing your phone to dial. Or just by your observation, you see the elderly person crossing the street with multiple bags and you pull over and you stop to help. Or you observe somebody in need of something and you meet them where they are.
It sounds like human intelligence, in addition to, the quotient of our cultural intelligence. There's this human intelligence that says that, one, do no harm, but if we can do something to help someone else. And that runs deep. That runs from your upbringing as a child. It has to do with family values, but also the black male experience. I'm doing research right now on the self-efficacy of black males who've experienced fatherlessness particularly. And I was interested in that because there are a lot of men who've made it, black men who've made it, a lot. Some who've made it, and they have stories to tell. They literally have lived experiences. Your lived experience in the C-suite, the corporate suite, in sum total, when we only have a certain amount of time, how would you describe that experience? Was it revealing, fulfilling, challenging, disheartening, empowering? I mean, you can choose the words to describe that experience because that's what you're speaking from is your C-suite experiences.
I would say that as a participant in C-suite discussions, it was challenging for sure. Now, I had the benefit of working for a leader who gave me a little more resilience in terms of how I operated by the time I made it to the C-suite. It sounds like a long answer, and it isn't.
That's good.
She really pushed me to answer the question, what is the worst possible thing that can happen to you at work? And this leader happened to be 5 foot tall, standing on a box. And I said, I could be fired. She said, what would you do? And I said, I would pick myself off the ground, dust myself off, and I would find another job if I would be fired. And she said, for you to be the most effective leader you can be, you have to be okay with the worst possible outcome. Now, the whole premise of bring your whole self to work, if anybody grew up in my neighborhood, Martin Luther King Park, you learn to be very resilient. And so once she gave me permission, I started bringing more of my whole self to work. And so I recognize as a leader, I'm not there to be embraced or to be popular, especially working and leading human resources as a discipline. The task at hand is to make sure that there's an advocacy component and you're representing perspectives that are not oftentimes heard.
Yeah. I think what keeps coming through in your responses is that it's human resources and the fact that these are people on the other end of business transactions or maybe even a marketplace, a place within the market for these entities. You worked for quite a few. Most recent, of course, was what is now Corewell Health, but prior to that, share a little bit of your journey, some of the most enlightening moments and some of the most challenging moments.
Well, I started my professional career at Steelcase. I was here in Grand Rapids for training and then assigned to the Detroit office and then came back to Grand Rapids and built a career in HR. And I probably thought, like a lot of Steelcase employees, that I was going to retire.
Right.
But the models began to change. And I tell people that if you build a career and have portfolio experiences either at the same company or externally, you can have a very solid, career path. And so I jokingly tell people that anytime a company decided to put me in a box, we only see you progressing to this level or this role, I would cast a wider net. And I would say that if I disagreed with the sentiment from the employer, I quite frankly left.
Yeah.
Some of my
gave you a warning indicator.
Right.
Go ahead and pursue.
Some of my closest friends, they say, "Ovell, name a company you haven't worked for," and I'm okay with that because it allowed me to get experiences that other organizations valued.
Sure. And these weren't flighty choices; these were decisions in building your career. And I think that you've done well. If you were talking directly to, let's say, an up and coming young person, Black in particular, dealing with some of the challenges in HR or on their way to the C-suite and not to deliver coffee, what would you say to them?
I would tell them that one of the primary components of becoming a leader is increasing your self-awareness.
Okay.
It is very important to ask for feedback and to listen, and that you should own your own development. So that would be part of it, because people ask me a lot of times, like, how did you do it? I had some really good, mentors along the way, and they would just tell me exactly what they thought. That's exactly what you need in order to zero in on your own personal growth and development. But I always tell people, make sure that you are preparing internally and externally, because you never know. It gives you more control over your destiny in terms of limiting the possibilities to one organization. Yeah. It's an opinion.
Yeah. So equipping yourself as much as you can while you can is key. And then self-awareness. Right. At what point did you make that connection for yourself? When did it kick in for you?
I would say early in my career. I think people, you don't have to name the names, but all of us have been around coworkers, colleagues, peers that may have been given an opportunity for advancement. And we may have been sitting there thinking, I was just as good or better. Right. I had been here longer, etc. And so early in my career, I started zeroing in on what is it going to take? And I shifted from performance to relationship, because relationship is also a variable. And I referenced, both sets of my grandparents who were instrumental in providing traditional guidance of, you have to be twice as good, etc. But there's another component in that is building relationships.
Yeah. And having good, solid relationships people you can trust. Let's take these last few moments and talk about the book. I want you to have an opportunity. I know you're not just out pushing the book, but you are a product in and of itself that could be a benefit to companies, to organizations, to individuals. You probably do some coaching along with your public speaking. First and foremost, congratulations on getting the book out. I know how challenging that is. But tell us a little bit more about it and where people can get it. What's in this book and why should I read it?
So the book is called The Big House. It basically focuses on my leadership journey as a diverse leader, and also provides organizations with recommendations in the categories of human resources and DE&I. I was able to secure the endorsement of the president of the HR Society, national gentleman, well known, which gives the book an extra layer of credentialing. And in the Amazon new release bestseller campaign, the book finished #1 in 3 categories.
Great, congratulations.
Human resources, workforce inclusion, and organizational behaviors. So people who are local to the Grand Rapids area, there is a shout out to Messiah Missionary Baptist Church.
You got to shout out. You got to shout out to your church. Yeah.
There's a chapter in there, Lessons from the Park. The park reference is Martin Luther King Park, having grown up across the street from there. And then what I'm doing professionally now is my website is Ask Ovell, with the tagline of, you better ask somebody. What I found working in HR is that I would get questions from people who said, hey, I got your name from somebody. I'm wrestling with something at my organization and I need to talk to someone in HR, and I'd like to ask you these questions. And what I would say is that I feel like that is my role in the village philosophy in terms of subject matter expertise. And I provide a platform for people to have those questions heard. And I do that no charge. And I think that I'm looking forward to the culmination of where that is going to be leading me in the future.
Oh, it absolutely creates a common conversation. You mentioned DE&I, and there may be someone listening that doesn't quite understand diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. They may not understand that it's a part of the very fiber of this country, whether it was the lack thereof, the need thereof, or now the reparations thereof. We've got some time. Talk a little bit about the DE&I stuff.
So the DE&I have always been an advocate on behalf of others and pushing the envelope in terms of the DE&I space. Now, when I was at Spectrum, the organization asked me to also serve as the Chief Diversity Officer.
So a twofer one.
Yeah, I was in my HR role.
No, I served as a CDO at a college. And that's a separate job from the HR person.
Yeah, and I said, I'm going to take this, but I want resources. So I talk about that in the book.
So let me make it sure. You were Director of Human Resources. And
SVP of Human Resources.
Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer.
And Chief Diversity Officer.
That's
so
2 jobs
I had
in one.
employee relations, talent acquisition, and the DE&I team.
That's a lot.
But I felt like having the resources allowed me to be effective. Mm-hmm. And what I would say in the DE&I space is we have to make sure that we are shifting organizations away from charitable short-term, recommendations and looking at the systems. And I've coined, and other practitioners reference, the 3 Ps: your policies, your procedures, and your practices. That's where you need to put time and attention in making recommendations that are bold, zeroing in on data that show you disparate outcomes. So I give people, nuggets in the book in terms of things that they can, employ within their organizations.
Yeah. I think that your journey or your experience with DE&I in and of itself is worth a whole nother book by itself. But you had a lot. I know a lot of people who've had your hand on their career in some way, in a very positive way. So you've made great contributions to this community. Spectrum is one of the largest employers, or formerly Spectrum, now Corwell, one of the largest employers in West Michigan. So that was a gateway or an opening door. Now you have an opportunity to share with, I was going to say minister to, share with people on a personal level. Is Ask Ovell the best way for them to reach you? Is that a good contact?
Yes, Ask Ovell is the best way to either submit a question for a likely answer, along with making a request for me to come into your organization for speaking and counsel.
I think that would be a great thing for people to do. If anybody's listening and you have influence, or you even know someone who is the decision maker, this would be a great opportunity to reach out before he gets so big and blown up out there to where we can't catch
I won't
up
forget
with
Grand Rapids.
You won't forget Grand Rapids. I'm honored just to be able to share. This is one of many, probably, this book. Am I correct?
People are saying, well, when's the next book? I have to take a chance to catch my breath. But I would say that if I were selecting a title, I would say Village Forgotten. I think that we miss the strength that we have as a community in leveraging each other to support our efforts. Wow. And so it's a blank sheet of paper with the title now. But if there is a next book, it would probably go in that direction.
I believe you should go for it. I'm going to read this and just chew it up, just thumbing through it. The topics are interesting. They actually will draw readers in. And this is my first time laying hands on it, but I followed you on social media when you were doing the launch and everything was ramping up for it. And it seems like the timing is perfect. We are post-COVID. We are not post-George Floyd era, but we are now moving into something else. There's a lot of reversal in people's promises to support equity and inclusion. I mean, reversal is happening every day. People are taking off the table, the deals and the decisions that they had made during the heightened awareness of Black Lives Matter and all of those things that were happening at the same time. Can you make some sense of that? I know that these topics like the leash lady, this little light of mine, worst possible outcome, say uncle, tables are turning, stop the silence, systems versus charity. Speak to where we are now from your expertise.
So, I mean, it's very interesting as I hear you, state the chapter names. Each one I came up with because I wanted the names to be a reason for someone to recall and resonate with the stories that were told. And so, say uncle is my reference to at what point would you raise your hand? And it's just interesting. This little light of mine is my chapter talking about me bringing my whole self to work, being raised in a traditional Baptist church, learning to talk back to the speaker by saying, amen. Say it, amen. Right, you really said something. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. I found myself sitting amongst people who may not understand that that's a part of me as I'm sitting in a meeting, thinking that I was silently stating amen and having said it out loud. Right. And that's okay. So each one by intent was designed to help us, move a little closer to advocating on behalf of others. This
sounds good, man. I'm looking forward to digesting this, excuse me, and then also making some referrals for you to get into some places. I know that from time to time, you will have to go in and do some tough things with some companies and organizations. But on the celebration side, on the high note, what's your ideal scenario for what it is that you do?
Now that's a great question.
That's why I'm here, man.
I would say my ideal scenario is helping people land on recommendations that are effective and that move the needle and create forums and organizations where people are heard and valued. That has to be a part of the equation because in HR now we're talking about, labor shortages, etc. And I heard a novel idea that wasn't really novel. A presenter was talking about how they look at those working in the healthcare space from a nursing perspective, the CNAs, which are more entry level, and then the RNs, which are, the frontline top nursing, that they look at their employees like they're all the same. I was like, we shouldn't need, reminders like that. We should be looking at the person as an individual and appreciating that we all have potential.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I love it. You are the walking epitome of what human resources is all about, giving people identity, credence to their callings and work, because people don't work just to work jobs to make money. There are times when people's entire identity is tied into what it is that they do career-wise. And I think that there's a happy, conjoining of that at some point, a cross-sectionality between people finding purpose in their employment and their job. And there should be a safe space. It should be a respected opportunity for them to grow and develop. And I'm glad you're speaking out. I'm honored to have had this time to talk with you. Any closing remarks? Again, let's pub a way for people to contact you. Closing thoughts.
So I would say the best way to contact me is to reach me via askovell.com to get that out of the way. And then I always want to reference this in terms of, a trick question for the audience. Like, what do you think is the most significant challenge that I face as a leader in the DE&I space? And I'm going to give you a clue what the answer is.
Being silent.
It's silence. Exactly.
Being silent.
So, stop the silence. We all have to be willing to participate in dialogue in order to make our communities better. And so I so appreciate this invitation.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep talking. That's why it's called Community Voices. You've been listening to Community Voices on 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. I'm Tarence Lauchie. Ovell Barbee has been a great guest. Get his book. Please get out and get this book. It is available on a couple of different platforms. I think that you can get this through Amazon.
Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. We Are Lit is a local book retailer here in Grand Rapids. You can order online.
Nice plug for We Are Lit. Lit as in literature, right? Great. So askovell.com. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it. You've been listening to Community Voices on 91.9 FM, The People's Choice.
You've been listening to Community Voices with your host, Tarence Lauchie. Community Voices can be heard every Friday at 12 noon. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest, or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Until next week, let your voice be heard in the community.